Alors, bonsoir tout le monde.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this public meeting dated April 11th, 2023. I would like to start by saying that the City of Dieppe recognizes that the land on which it operates is part of the unceded traditional ancestral lands of the Mi'kmaq. The peace and friendship treaties that the Mi'kmaq jointly developed and signed with the British Crown in the 18th century apply to this territory. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of land or resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq title and set out the rules for what was to be a lasting relationship between the parties. I would also like to proceed with our opening meeting or opening minutes. Dear colleagues, let's have the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. So as we begin this meeting, it is with great sadness that we learned of the death yesterday of a staff member from Public Works, Mr. Stephen Rouse. I would like to offer my sincerest condolences to his spouse and his family, and to all the colleagues who worked with him for so many years. He worked for the city as a worker since 2009. He was called Rouse by his colleagues, and he was very proud to be part of the Public Works team of the city of Dieppe. His colleagues shared with us that his attitude and his joie de vivre went a long way to building team spirit and to a positive work environment at the operations center. His good mood was evident to all those he worked with. So Rouse always found that Dieppe was a great place to live and to work, and his sense of duty was equaled only by his sense of humor. He's an example for all of us. So thank you, Rouse, for your dedication to our community. And his death is very moving to me because I knew his father, who was his police chief for Dieppe a number of years ago before the RCMP took over that service for the two communities. And often people wonder about the Rouse Street in that area by Dieppe Boulevard and what the origin of that name is. And I was always proud to tell people that street was named after Mr. Rouse, the former police chief. The same Aucoin Street has the same type of origin. But to the Rouse family, once again, and on behalf of City Council and all residents of Dieppe, we are moved by someone who died at such a young age, someone who was so very committed.
Alors, encore une fois, bienvenue.
All right, so welcome everyone once again. The meeting is called to order. Do we have confirmation of quorum? Yes, all right. So we do have quorum. Are there any conflicts of interest to declare? Was anything received? Nothing was received with regard to conflicts of interest, so. Item 6, adoption of the agenda. Councillor Thibodeau, and seconded by Councillor Boudreau. On the question. No question. So all those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, say nay. The the resolution carries as presented. Presentations, inquiries and petitions, item 7. So we'll start with 7.1, inquiries by council members with respect to Kodiak Regional RCMP. And this evening we have Inspector Chantal Farah Arsenault here with us tonight. So she has a short presentation to make. And as soon as I am able to turn her mic on, go ahead. Welcome. Your Worship, councillors, thank you very much. I'm going to start to say that this week is the National Week of Telecommunications Operators. So hats off to all those who work in this field. They keep us safe, and they are the people who, at the end of the line, when people call, they keep these people calm, and they gather the information that the police or the fire service needs so that we can provide the assistance. It's not an easy job. It takes people with calm nerves, with a big heart as well. So if you know some of those people, this is their week. Now, with the arrival of the warmer weather and spring, we see there are more people out and about. People are out walking, and people are. We just want to remind people that don't secure your objects in your car, and it could be just change or cigarettes or keys or necklaces. Those are all things that if you leave them in the car, they attract bypassers. And I just saw a few examples in the city of Dieppe of people leaving things in their car. So that's why I just wanted to mention it tonight. In terms of drug consumption in public places, as you know, we're doing a lot of proactive patrols on foot to try to discourage that type of conduct in our municipality. So I have a few statistics for you with regard to the crime reduction unit has done in the last 2 years rather. So they did a lot of on-foot patrols and in vehicles as well. And the issue is mainly in the downtown core of Moncton. That's where the largest number of complaints are received. And in the last 2 weeks, we checked with about 15 people. There were 7 drug seizures. We also took the time to talk to these people about community services that are available. So there are services available to these people. We arrested 6 individuals who had warrants as well, and we brought them to court so that they could answer to the charges. On April 4th, there was we did a search on April, and we found crystal meth in a home, hydromorphone, and another substance. So 2 people in their 60s in Moncton are facing charges with respect to that arrest. So in terms of patrols, on April 8th, we arrested 2 men, one in his 30s and one in his mid-40s, in the industrial park of Dieppe. And they were arrested for theft of copper wires. They will be appearing in court on August 30th. On April 9th, there was another complaint in the region. It brought us back to the industrial park for the theft of copper, and we found one of the individuals who had been caught the night before, the 30-year-old individual. So since he had breached his conditions, he is scheduled to appear in court tomorrow. So, Your Worship, that is the updates that I wanted to give you. If you have any questions, now is the time. Please don't hesitate. Are there any questions from councillors? Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. I made an observation recently. There are a lot of people going through red lights, and it's really an issue. Now, I don't understand why people are taking that risk. The light is telling yellow or turning yellow, and they're racing through the red to get through the red light. And this is a problem in Dieppe as much as in Moncton. So I think we're due for an accident. So we have to look into this. Mr. Councillor Thibodeau, you bring a good point. You make a good point there. People should understand that when the light turns yellow, it's not time to race through, it's time to stop. So all we can do is communicate this message and encourage people, but we have to catch people kind of in the act. Now, if we're at a light and somebody cuts through the red light, or then we can stop them. But if we're not always at these places, but if you ever do see this happen and you can get the license plate number and and tell us the direction that the vehicle is headed, uh, we can do something. But I know that things happen very quickly, and it's not always possible. Well, that makes me think of a second point. A lot of people have their license plates that are either really rusted and we can't see the numbers, or some people put plastic over the license plate and we can't see through it. So, or it's too dirty, it gathers dust. So it's difficult to report those vehicles. Well, that is an infraction to the the highway legislation. And when we see those, especially with people, we try to remind people, if your license plate is you have your license plate has to be visible, and you're not the first person to tell us this, but when we do see people doing that, we manage it as best we can. All right, Councillor Godbout. We're coming upon cycling season. What's happening with regard to bike thefts, and what advice do you have for our residents? That's a very good question. I would say that we're at the point where if you own something, you have to lock it up. You can't just leave the bike by your house and hope it'll stay there. Uh, Now, and in this is a recent change. So people in Montreal and Toronto have been locking their bikes for a long time, but it's new for us. It's important that you also take note of your serial number, take pictures of your bikes, have your ID, because if you ever do get your bike stolen, you know, if we can't prove that a bike is stolen or that parts are stolen, we can't do anything. So tell people to take the necessary measures, secure your bikes, and take that information down, so that if you do get it stolen, there's a chance that we can retrieve it. All right, Councillor Bridomé. Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to add to what Conseiller Thibodeau was just saying with regard to red lights. What I've observed is that it's taxi drivers who cut me off in the road. It happened to me twice in the last 2 months, and I was like, wow, uh, are they in that much a hurry? And if there are people in the vehicle, that this could lead to accidents. But for me, I saw taxi drivers, and it was very visible because you could see the sign on the car. So just a remark. Thank you. And well, I too can confirm that RCMP stops people for speeding. I saw somebody on Chartersville. Uh, I was walking, and then all of a sudden I saw the lights go off, and when the RCMP got out of the car, I said, "It's great to see our tax money at work." I didn't have a great deal of pity for the person who was getting a fine there, but I hope he got a fine. Maybe he just got a warning. But all right, I see no further questions. So thank you again for your presentation and for being here. And As always, you're always welcome to stay in, but we also understand if you have to leave for other reasons, sir. So thank you very much. That brings us to questions by members of the public. What was that? Oh, sorry. Public hearing 7.2. I jumped over that. So public hearing for zoning bylaw Z10. Mr. Melançon. So we have a member of the planning team here who's going to be doing a presentation. So we'll let him take the mic, take the floor. All right, thank you, Your Worship. Councillors, good evening. This is my first presentation in front of you. Let's hope that there will be several others. So for the public hearing tonight, oh, well, since it's your first presentation, maybe you could introduce yourself. Charles-Luc Andry, I'm a city planner with the planning department, and I started with the city last December. So we're here to talk about the proposed amendments to zoning bylaw Z10. And so what we'll be doing is we'll start with the timeline, including critical dates. And then I'll talk about what the projects are, what the amendments that are being proposed are, and then we'll give a bit of context as well that led to the project. I want to point out that this is a request that was made by BM Homes, and there's a representative of that company here in the room. So on February 27th, there was the initiation of the process. We set the public hearing date, and so the April 11th is the date of the public hearing. April 19th is when there will be a presentation to the PAC committee with a recommendation, and then a decision could be made by council on May 8th. And then on May 23rd, we hope to see the bylaw Z10 2021-6 adopted. So basically what's being asked is this. It's with regard to RHM and R3 zones to allow the creation of secondary suites with the principal uses of semi-detached dwellings. So basically units in those uses were also permitted with single family dwellings. So what's being proposed is at 6.3 and 5.3 and 5.4. So we would not be dealing with the accessory dwelling provisions. So not exceeding 35% of the dwelling's gross floor area. We won't be touching that. The driveway access points, the size. In terms of public notices, there was a notice that was posted on the city website, and there's no specific site being targeted, so there were no notices sent out by the mail, and we did not receive any comments about this as well. Here we have a map of the city with the zones that would be affected by the changes. So we can see them here. We can see what areas are being talked about. And then we have the service areas. We're looking at 3.9 kilometers squared. And then for HRM, it's 2.4 square kilometers. Here we have an example of facade plans that's being proposed by the builder. And so just to give you a context or an idea of what it could look like. So the concept of a semi-detached unit would not change from the street. But the change would be seen on the lateral side of the building. That would give access to the accessory dwelling. Here we have an example of the floor plan for the accessory dwelling. in the basement. So there would be a base, a washroom, kitchen, and so forth. So if there are any questions or comments, we can answer them now. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments?
Aucune question? Hop, on a une. Madame Le Boutillier.
Councillor Le Boutillier. Thank you, Your Worship. It might be a little early because PAC hasn't really reviewed this yet, but I had a question of information. We're looking here at a possibility of changing bylaws Z10, as you mentioned, but is the PAC, as well as reviewing this one specifically, are they also going to look at what's being done elsewhere, the impact that this may have on the community? Because we hear this fairly frequently, uh, the issue of Airbnb and subletting and so on. Will they take all of these possibilities into consideration and then make a recommendation accordingly here? Are they going to add what is being proposed to R10 in order to make sure that all of this is taken into account? Well, in this case, the PAC, well, I don't know, if these accessory dwellings, would it be for them to become Airbnb, or is it just an change? Well, in this case, we're just dealing with accessory dwellings, so it won't deal with the whole issue of Airbnb, generally speaking. But this is not something that was in the report, but it's something that can be looked at if it's a problem for Airbnbs. Well, perhaps I didn't ask my question properly. Let me rephrase that. When we issue a proposal like this one, do we look at all of the impact that it can have on the community, as the example I just gave you? Maybe perhaps it should be just in HRM, or do we look at everything, general impacts? Well, a zoning bylaw, generally speaking, does not deal with the actual use of the building, whether it's occupied by the owner or tenant or elsewhere. The zoning bylaw doesn't really look at that. You'd have to go through another type of regulation in those cases, Alexandre? Yes, if you allow me to add to that. It was mentioned in the report that you received that, and this is a report that will be distributed to the PAC members as well. So this was a really dealing with RHM and R3 zones and for multifamily and single unit dwellings. So we're talking about the number of units is determined by the size and the height of the building and so on. But in our assessment, we looked at the different impact that it could have in terms of densification of a sector and the impact that it could have in terms of the physical aspect. For example, if there would be a physical change necessary, generally speaking, there wouldn't be any physical change made to a semi-detached building, except that the access to the basement unit might be through the side door. But usually you will have a side door to access the big basement. In what we say in English is we talk about hidden density, because this type of densification appears in residential areas, but without adding extra floors, or you're not adding extra surface area to any buildings. As you mentioned, as you saw, the plan that's included in this document is a typical plan that we see throughout the zone, with the exception that there's a dwelling added into the basement. So typically we don't deviate in terms of the width of the driveways, There are rules limiting the width of driveways, so that doesn't change. It'll remain the typical width of a driveway for a typical semi-detached unit. And we're also not going to um, change any of the other existing regulation in order to allow this accessory dwelling. But this would just be to allow accessory dwellings in buildings that would not change otherwise. And I hope that answers your question. And the information will also be given to the PAC members for their review as well. Thank you.
Merci, Madame Godbout.
Thank you. Councillor Godbout. Yeah, just to follow up on that, because I want to make sure I understood correctly. The way I look at this, I'm trying to see what kind of behavior we are encouraging. Would this amendment, would this encourage behavior that would increase the number of Airbnb and bed and breakfasts, for example? Well, that's not something that was looked at by me because bed and breakfast or Airbnb can take different forms, can be in different types of buildings. I live in a row housing and there are Airbnbs in there. I know that people have bought cottages and put them on Airbnb. So an Airbnb can take all sorts of different shapes and sizes, but RHMs and R3s, well, accessory dwellings are not um, really as popular. But to come back to the objective of this amendment being proposed, and perhaps the developer might want to speak to this, but there's a strong demand of people who want this type of housing in order to create greater housing units. We call them mortgage helpers. It helps with the affordability. Somebody can buy a semi-detached unit. The mortgage might be a little high, but if I can rent out the basement to a tenant, for example, it gives me the opportunity to get into the real estate market and allows me to become an owner, a property owner. So it this isn't really an affordable housing measure as such, but it helps uh, to make more affordable units. So how can we, with our Airbnb, there's always the issue of how do you control it and so on. But I think that's a whole separate issue and should be objective of another whole separate debate. Thank you. That answers my question. But now I challenge you to put yourself in the shoes of somebody who wants to go into the market, but this can have the opposite effect because I I can by making an Airbnb out of my new residence, I can make even more money to pay the monthly mortgage payment. So it has the contrary effect to what we're trying to do here. So we want to be reassured that this whole issue can be controlled somehow so that we don't have the impact that's contrary to what we're looking for in here. That's what I want to be reassured about, because I think that this is an issue that we do see in other municipalities and we want to avoid it here in Dieppe. And I just want to make sure that that doesn't become the unintended impact of this. Thank you. Well, the merit of this policy and the difference between the two perspectives might be difficult to understand, but at least it's helpful to know what's going on downstairs, in your basement. And we are all aware that this is already done. We talk about students in university or at community college or newcomers even who set up in somebody's basement and we don't have any idea of the quality of the basement. I don't want to start make people afraid and refer back to what happened in Montreal a few weeks ago, where people were living in a building that was not appropriate at all. But here we're looking at buildings that are at least follow the building standards and so on. Yeah, but I agree with you in your comment, but we have to foresee all possible consequences of something. And it's better to be very clear in what we allow the zoning, in what we want the zoning to do, and that we anticipate any possible outcomes, because affordable housing is important, but in other municipalities, Airbnb have the contrary impact. So I'd like to understand, I just want to make sure that this is the best way to proceed, or if we're trying to encourage affordable housing, perhaps we shouldn't allow bed and breakfasts in the zone. Any further comments? Well, if not, thank you for your presentation, and we'll see where we go with it. It's a start. Thanks again, and have a great evening. Questions from the public now. Does anybody have questions for the council? Please approach the mic.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councillors. My name is Tim Westfield. I live at 2138 Champlain Street. I came here tonight looking for an update on a planning proposed land request use that was put forward last August. I just kind of got my own answer on the way in here when I found out that it was appealed and reversed. For those of you that don't know, I'm talking about a hot mix asphalt plant that was put in at 2158 Champlain Street. That plant is a used plant. It was purchased, delivered, installed, started up to test run, all before the planning committee was even asked for permission to install that thing. Now, we knew that he would probably appeal. In fact, he let it be known to all of the residents in the area that he planned to appeal. And I came here on behalf of those residents looking for an answer, looking for an update. Unfortunately, I got a really punch to the gut when I got here this evening to find out about that update. Now, what I'd like to know is, on behalf of those residents, can anything happen? Can anything be done? You started the meeting with the Serenity Prayer. Is there courage to change? Or do we have to accept this? Dieppe is a great place to live. I've been here for 40 years. I've raised my family. And to have, in the planning committee world, there's an acronym that's very well known, NIMBY, not in my backyard. I guarantee you that tribunal that this appeal went to, all of them went, yeah, based on the facts, he can have it. But NIMBY, not in my backyard. And I guarantee every single one here does not want this in their backyard. But it's in our backyard. It's inside the city of Dieppe. We have espoused ourselves to be a great city. We exceed every minimum requirement that I've ever seen in all my travels. I've traveled extensively. I am proud to call Dieppe home of our bike trails, our walking trails, our recreational facilities. We exceed all of that. There is no minimum standards set out by a province when it comes to that. But we exceed them anyway. So why do we have to be held to the minimum standards that this province sets forth to allow a hot mix asphalt plant in a residential area? There's a stream that goes through that plant area that feeds water supplies and ducks, ponds, all of this stuff down along Melanson Road in the newly annexed area. I guarantee those residents are not going to be happy to hear about this either. And I looked at the minimum standards that the province puts out. And nowhere in there does it talk about sound, what kind of sound is emitted from an HMA plant. And if you look up all the studies, it's loud. I live close to the airport. It served me well over 40 years. As your worship knows, we meet on a lot of flights. But to have a hot mix asphalt plant waking me up every morning at 7 a.m. and it's going to run for 12 hours a day, just NIMBY, not in my backyard. And is there anything this council, this city can do to fight this? Thank you.
Well, Tim, first of all, been a while.
It has been.
Good to see you again.
I'm retired.
Wish it was under different circumstances.
So do I.
We've just been advised of the decision just a few days ago. We need to have further discussion of, on the process. If it's going to what's our chances? We'll have to evaluate what's our chances of success. We'll need some advice from legal advice, and without fail, you will make sure you leave your coordinates to one of the people up front here. Probably Alexandre be the best one.
I've already got his business card just before the meeting.
Since that falls in his in his area. Yeah.
I know that
Something we need to talk about because obviously we have to look at all sides of it in terms of risk for the community overall. What it means, you've done a good job highlighting the issue with the local planning committee, and I think staff has done a good job in preparing our lawyers for the presentation, and now we have to consider the possibility of appeal. But again, there's no guarantees in life, as you know.
No.
So we'll see. I'm sure we'll be in touch with you over the next week or so, and have a heart-to-heart discussion.
Thank you. I know the dangers are out there. We all know it. My son's a firefighter for the city of Moncton. He's been to fires. Dieppe Fire Department went in December to fight an out-of-control HMA fire in Riverview. These the greater town of Napanee, Ontario, just overruled the province and said no, even though the HMA was meeting the minimum standards. Again, that's Ontario, it's not New Brunswick. I don't know what the municipal rules are and the laws are, but thank you, Your Worship.
Yeah. See you again soon.
Okay.
Quelqu'un d'autre?
Is there anybody else?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Manager, councillors, city employees that represent this great city that I'm proud to say that I'm now part of.
Please identify. Okay.
Sorry, my name's Don Demke. I live on Melanson Road, and I have a couple of those duck ponds right in my backyard. I actually had some young ladies this year figure skating on those ponds. I've coached young ladies for the last 18 years from Memramcook and Dieppe. I've only been here for just over 20 years with my wife that grew up in Dieppe. So I'm going to put you on the spot. My neighbor did a good job representing it, and I'm going to come from my background, which is an engineer. I'm not happy with this, and I hope I can get through this without too much trouble. And I hope that you will share in my frustration, my sadness, my anger that this is being allowed to do. I crunched some numbers. I try to do some research on the health effects of people. I found ranges of 2 to 3.6 kilometers from where it's operated that can have negative effects on the health of people living in that area. Those health effects range from, as you know, the bad odor, but it also has respiratory problems, skin problems, cognitive function, cancer, and some of those can lead to death. I don't want to be over dramatic, but this is a heavy industrial business. It has no place inside the city limits and no place near residential areas. Things can be done to stop this. Before we go the legal route, which right now seems like the only way, the city could negotiate with them to do a land switch to at least get it into the industrial park. I crunched numbers on the 3.6 kilometers. I understand that those 2 to 3.6 depends on what they burn to heat up the aggregate and to volatilize off the bitumen to make the asphalt. Considering right now that the natural gas is some ways away, I believe he'd probably be using oil, diesel, maybe even waste oil, which would make the distance even longer. But at 3.6 kilometers, when you do the math of pi r squared, that means it could represent upwards of 100,000 acres. This last year, land sold on Melanson Road at 50,000 an acre. Math quickly, that's $500 million at the low end for raw land that this could affect. This is now, since the city's expanded, in the heartland of where the city is going to be developing. I ask you, if you had a family, if you had a business, would you be looking at putting it near an asphalt plant? If you had a home and you could breathe that in and hear it, you could smell it, do you think you would be selling your property? This is pretty close. I don't know where each one of you live, if you live on Chartersville or another road. Some of these people that just came in with the city just built houses now within that radius. Most of them do not even know that this asphalt plant exists. To my knowledge, only the people that were formally notified were within 60 meters of the property line, which I believe only affected about 8 or 9 households. So some have come because we come to these meetings, and hopefully people are watching tonight, as we don't have a very large crowd, and they're going to tell their neighbor, do you know about this asphalt plant? When's it going to start running? What does it mean to me? We have a city planning department. They have a very crucial role. This is a very big issue. It's not one that's going to go away anytime soon. But essentially, if this fellow, without permission, set it up, run to the province, do we need a planning department? Because basically what he's saying is, I can set up anything I want. I just got to go to the province and get him to do it. Imagine if your neighbor said, I'm going to take up welding as a home hobby and starts welding in his garage. And then you'd have to fight that. Well, we have the biggest hobbyist that's going on right now. He's setting up an industrial park. Heavy industrial park right now. Some of them things that we know about that he didn't get a building permit. There are other things that I've just found out. So we're frustrated this way because what's going to happen is those people that are there that are retired, some are not very wealthy, they're going to have to stay. Some are looking after older parents. And you're just being, if you're out there, if you've ever seen it, it's coming. If they're going to know it, they're going to be breathing it in. I was just last weekend, it wasn't even running, and I smelled something, and I went closer to where they were, and the odor was stronger. I didn't see any smoke. But these people are going to have to put up with it. Maybe people like me and Tim, we'll just move away, but others can't, and they'll suffer for it. We need you as allies to look at this. This is 10,000 acres of negative impact on health. It could have larger ramifications down the road as the city grows and expands. You take a number of steps to make this a healthier city, a city of leadership, of saying what it could be. This would be a step back and a blemish on your records, allowing an asphalt plant to go right next door to residential areas. And that's what's happened. And asphalt season starts in like 30 days. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I think I've already expressed where we're at right now, and we have the decision of the court that we're going to be looking at with the city lawyers and see what best advice we can get. That's as much as I can say at this point in time, regretfully. Quelqu'un d'autre?
Anyone else?
Alors, on va continuer avec la
All right, we will continue with the meeting. So item 9, adoption of minutes. 9.1, regular council meeting held on March 27th. Councillor Thibodeau, seconded by Councillor Lantang on the question. No questions. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The resolution passes as presented. That brings us to item 10.1, administration. Mr. Melançon, 10.1.1, ratification. Thank you, Your Worship and councillors. So on a regular basis, we make directives that were adopted at closed meetings public. And the first one that we're making public involves Groupe Touchette. I'll give you just a second here. Do you want to take over, Stéphane? Stéphane will continue until Mr. Melançon. Could somebody go get him a glass of water? I'll do my best. All right, so the first directive that we want to ratify is that the council directed staff to inform Groupe Touchette in writing that the city is committed to providing adequate water flow up to a maximum of 3,600 US GPM by June 2024 for their construction project of a 60,000 square foot building on land located on Aviation Avenue. So that's item 1. Do you want to continue? All right. All right, let him. All right, the second point is we have an agreement for the sale of land with on-task property holdings on Marché Street. So it is PID 705-655-536. It's for the sale of, it's a land of 11,698 square feet at the cost of $233,960 plus HST. And again, it's on Marché Street, and it's to continue building on our downtown level. The third directive that we're making public this evening is the authorization for a sale and development agreement between the City of Dieppe and Eddy Group Limited on Hartnett Street. So it's for the sale of land identified under PID 703-93574 at a price of $275,000 plus HST for the development of a real estate project that will get underway this year, and it should be completed in the following year. So those are the 3 directives that we wanted to make public today. All right, so for ratification, Councillor Mélissa Boudreau, that the council accept ratify the directives adopted at closed meetings of council concerning the following topics. So 1, commitment water flow increase, Aviation Avenue, adopted April 29th, 2021. 2, sale of land, PID 705-65536, Marché Street, adopted June 27th, 2022. Oh, 27th rather, June 27th, 2022. 3, signing authority, development agreement, Eddy Group Limited, adopted March 13th, 2021, so proposed, or so moved. Moved by Councillor Boudreau, seconded by Councillor Turgeon-Roy on the question. No questions. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, nay. The motion carries or resolution carries as presented. Item 10.2, Planning and Development, 10.2.1, PAC recommendation, Mr. Melançon. So following a request, this deals with the extension and location of Mélanie, Delta, and Champion Streets, as well as location of land for public purposes. So the recommendation is positive, and we are being asked to accept the Jardin Beau Soleil subdivision, or approve the Jardin Beau Soleil subdivision Unit 7. Councillor Brideau, that council accept the Planning Advisory Committee's recommendation relating to the acceptance of the Jardin Beau Soleil subdivision Unit 7 amending tentative plan dated February 24th, 2023, which provides for the extension and location of Mélanie, Delta, and Champion Streets, as well as the location of lands for public purposes. So moved, Your Worship. Moved by Councillor Brideau, seconded by Councillor Lanting. On the question, Ms. Godbout.
When I look at the analysis of land for public purposes by the city of Dieppe, we're referred to the trail plan dated 2014. Do we have anything more recent? Do we have a master plan that something more recent that we could use to orient us, to direct us? It seems a little old to be used as our reference. I mean, there's been a growth and there's been a change in direction since then. Mr. Richard, yes, this is the most recent plan that is still in effect. We are working on a new plan currently on green plans and green spaces and parks. So we hope to have a new revised plan by the end of this year. But usually we have master plans that last 5 to 10 years, and this one is just under 10 years, and it's what we have currently. Yeah, it's just that these are the recommendations that we rely on when we see this. But if you go into greater depth, well, it seems a little dated for me. So as a guiding principles, do you think that that would have a major impact on what's being recommended here? And I realize it hasn't been done yet, but what is being proposed here, is that at least, is it aligned to what we expect will become the guiding principles of a future plan? Well, to talk specifically about this recommendation, I would ask Eric to talk about it. But in terms of the future plan, I think the RFP will define what we're asking for, but usually what we ask a consultant is to find best practices, what's changed, how things have changed. Of course, our territory has grown and there have been certain changes, and that will be part of the mandate that will be given to a consultant responsible for preparing a new plan. But on your specific question, I don't know if Eric can add anything. No. Well, did we look at active transportation, for example? Where we is there anything else? There's nothing that it would be in conflict with this. I understand that you don't, your plan isn't necessarily just on active transportation, but when we're talking about trails and where we're going to place them, and they has to be aligned with future plans and whether there is land for public purposes or not. Well, if I understand your question, what we're proposing here, is it considering what's in the current active transportation plan? Yes, or any other plan? Well, I think in principle, yes, but the new active transportation plan that we have currently was not there when we did the assessment for this issue. And my colleague Eric wasn't on that, so it would have been adopted before 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 Eric even came here. So generally speaking, yes, there will be the extension of one of the trails that will be parallel to Lakeburn, to the future street in Lakeburn. So yes, I think they are aligned, but there's nothing in the active transportation plan currently that says that there will be a trail there. Yeah, but we're talking about 12 meters. We're saying that we'd like it even larger, perhaps in some areas, and there were other options that were brought up. But at some point, we'd like to have this reflected in when I look at this, and I try to see, well, maybe it's because we're referring to something that is dated, but I'm fine for this evening, but I just wanted to mention this to make sure that we have some old references. Your Worship, if you allow me to add something. Well, this is one of the last phases of a global plan. There had different phases for this plan, this subdivision, and it's been working on. They've been working on it for a number of years already. So this is just a continuation of a subdivision plan that started earlier. Thank you, Councillor Leboutier. Thank you, Your Worship. We referred here to this issue and the recommendation. What what is the exemption that we're being asked here? Well, it's to identify the public streets and the land for public services. When we identify public streets, this is why we have to go through council for approval. But the streets are already identified. Yeah, but there's one new public street and the extension of others. So if there's an extension of streets, it has to come back to council. Yes. Any further questions? So once again, for the resolution, all those in favor will signify by saying aye. Contrary, nay. It's carried as presented. Thank you, Your Worship. I note also in the recommendations, I note that there's a reference made to previous plans, and I might have some questions when we look at the neighborhood parks and the distances, but is this planned? Or when we established certain references, certain standards, what was the density of the city at the time? I'm just wondering where it came from, and do we have any idea that things might change in the future? Now densification is going to change. Are we going to have to review the distance between our different parks and their use and so on? And what impact might this have on the growth? It's just, I might have questions in the future on this kind of project. Thank you. Next item on the agenda. Then there are no municipal bylaws. There are no notices of motion this evening, so we are at item 13, inquiries and announcement by members of council. We'll start with Councillor Godet. And you're on mute. Thank you, Your Worship. I have nothing this evening. Thank you. And Councillor Lantaigne. I have nothing this evening, Your Worship. Thank you. And we'll continue on then in the same direction. Councillor Le Boutier. Thank you. No, I don't have very much to add. Just a couple of brief items. It came out in the news recently that the province of New Brunswick, and I'm sorry, I don't know the word in French, but they're going to start coming out with radar cameras in April. What is the process? Are we ready? And is it something we want to do in our city? Yeah, that's good news, actually. We were talking about red lights earlier, so these speed camera radars will be one of the solutions. So through the city's association, we sent a letter to the province to see who was going to be responsible for these radar cameras at intersections and elsewhere. So it's a question of whoever receives the revenue can be responsible for them. If the province wants to keep the revenues, well, we ask them to assume full responsibility in terms of the management of the issue. We're still waiting for an answer. Thank you. I would like to advise people that next week at 6 p.m. we're going to have a presentation on the green cover plan. For those who want to participate, everybody is welcome. And it's not a priority, but it's not one of our top priorities, but I've seen that a number of municipalities have started issuing regulations and bylaws on dogs and cats. Of course, we know we can't control everything. Several years ago, we saw we looked at this, and in some areas they impose chips be placed on animals. And I know we have other priorities, but it would be nice to have it on the radar. It would, because we might get complaints in that sense, but I'm sure that it will come up. And that's all for me. Thank you. Thank you.
Madame Godbout.
Councillor Godbout. Thank you, Your Worship. Two things, one announcement and something else. The next meeting of the police authority is April 20th, and I think it'll be happening, CRPA rather, it'll be happening in Moncton. And we've been talking about dogs in the last few meetings, but maybe we could, maybe at the next meeting, I would be curious to know if we issued more permits in the past year, and is the growth of new permits that we're seeing reflect the larger number of dogs that I'm seeing in the city. And so I'm just curious to know if our bylaw is working. It'd be interesting to know what's happening. And now that we can have more animals within the same building as well, I just wanted to see if we could have some information on that. Is that it? Councillor Boudreau. Thank you, Your Worship. I think, well, it's a theme tonight. We're talking about animals. My question was, or is, a little while back, we had a citizen presentation to allow urban chickens, or chickens in the city, hens in the city. And we know that in Moncton, there's a bylaw dealing with that issue, and there are other cities that are doing things as well. I think it would be good that we kind of regulate that, or at least that we wait for the recommendations. I know that the tree bylaw is taking up a lot of time from employees, but had there been any developments about bylaws for hens? Do we have a date, or are they any upcoming discussions? Well, hens are allowed in certain parts of the city, so but the message is it's not prohibited everywhere, but so I wonder if we have to come up with a new procedure, and there was a play on words in French there. Thank you for the question. We've did a bit of work through a consultant who did an analysis on what currently exists, and they did a survey of best practices throughout the country as well. So now my department will have to come up with a presentation to talk about that work. And maybe the council can debate the topic. So the question is, do we regulate it, or do we keep the status quo? As the CAO was saying, hens are allowed in certain areas. And the majority of actually the territory allows hens in the more rural areas. But the question is, do we want to allow hens in the urban setting as well? So I think this is a debate that council may be able to have. And I don't want to give you a specific date, but I would like to bring that presentation to you in the coming months, so for debate. Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's all for me. That's all. Councillor Turgeon-Roy. Thank you. I like we're playing pickleball tonight. I have an announcement and a question. First of all, on April 22 is our community cleanup. It's Earth Day, and we won't be having any other meetings before then. So I just wanted to talk about this. There will be an activity at Rotary Park between 10 and 3 o'clock. There'll be lots of activities, and then we'll proceed with the city cleanup. And there's even a competition with photos. If you take pictures, you send a picture of what you've collected, and you can run the chance of winning a prize. Another thing is a question that I had. We talked about traffic lights earlier and cameras, and that made me think of this. Last fall, we had sent a letter to ask, with the support of the Association des Municipalités Francophones, we'd asked about to see if we could have more clarity about noise levels and regulating noise levels. And you know that we're back. The season has arrived. There'll be more noise. Yes, the minister notified that he had received the letter, and Ms. Showak, I believe, was involved in that. Now, I recontacted Ms. Showak, and I didn't get any response yet. So I'm not sure what they're going to, I don't know if they're going to be doing that, if they're going to be coming up with some regulation. Could you maybe do a follow-up on that? You know, with spring, that issue is going to come up again there. So, all right, that's it. Have a good week. Councillor Brideau. Thank you, Your Worship. I have nothing specific tonight to share. Thank you. Councillor Thibodeau. Thank you, Your Worship. I just have a follow-up that I want to do. About a month ago, or maybe a little bit longer, we received a request from La Fondation Marichette. I'm just wondering where that's at. Yes, so we received the request. I sent it to the Recreation Department. Now, that'll be part of the 2024 budget. So the requests that we received for before were already dealt with. So we'll be considering their request in the 2024 budget process. There's no remaining funds in our current budget. Well, we're in April. We're the winter wasn't very difficult, but if council wants us to go more quickly, we can look at that. But you know, what we chose to send that request to the 2024 budget process. All right, thank you. I don't want to, well, I'll just kind of follow the same theme. I have nothing to add, so have a nice evening, everyone.